Check it, bro. I'm surfing with Fuse's new unbreakable glass bottle, bro.
That's actually Fuse's new plastic bottle, and there's a drink inside, bro. Fuse, vitamin and mineral-enhanced beverages infused with quality ingredients and exceptional taste. And now with its new plastic bottle, healthy just got portable.
First of all,
this is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
It might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't care.
The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the sports guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report, special doubleheader for you this week. I have some atoning to do. I wrote a terrible column about tennis a few weeks ago. Not terrible that I was mean or anything, but just poorly written, poorly researched, and it was one of those columns that a couple days later, I really wished I could have had a mulligan on. And, you know, I have some excuses, but the bottom line is anything I hand in should be the best I can do, and that was not one of my better efforts, especially from a research standpoint. So the basic premise of that column was that if somebody played the best tennis match of all time, would you even watch it? And my argument was no, actually most Americans wouldn't watch it. And then as it turned out, 3 weeks later, Federer and Nadal have the greatest tennis match of all time. And a lot of people watched it, and it ended up on Sports Illustrated. So it went from being one of the top 10 worst columns I ever wrote to top 3, possibly top 1. Anyway, I wanted to have James Blake on to talk about not only the column and some of the things I got wrong, but also about the fabulous match on Sunday. So let's go to him right now. There he is in his car, James Blake. How you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me, Bill.
You're the first top 10 anything I've ever had on the podcast. I was actually
really?
I was racking my brain about this. I guess you could say David Stern's one of the top 10 commissioners ever. Or
I would think
Marv
so, yeah.
Albert. Yeah, Marv Albert's top 10 basketball announcers ever. But I've never had actually who's actually ranked in the top 10 with a specific scoring system, so I was excited about that. So wait, you're like you reached number 8?
I'm 8 right now.
Yeah, you're 8
I'm
now.
8 right now. I've been as high as 4.
I mean, so this rating system, it's pretty arbitrary, and it ties in all the different tournaments and all that stuff. Do you just, is it released on a certain day?
Yeah, it's every Monday, and I guess it's probably anything but arbitrary. It may seem arbitrary to some of the fans, and it's pretty hard to explain or to understand unless you see it every time. But it's like a 52-week rolling ranking because it changes every week depending on how you did at that time last year as well.
Oh. So you have a general sense of where you're going to place each Monday?
Yeah, we could always figure it out beforehand. We know pretty much what's going on. So like right now, after Federer and Nadal, we knew both those guys had tons of points to defend because Federer won Wimbledon last year, and all the points you get for winning Wimbledon would come off at the same time at Wimbledon next year. So if he had gone out and lost in the first round, it would have really hurt his ranking as opposed to any other time if you lose in the first round when you didn't have points to defend. It's complicated, and it makes it crazy, and it makes me wish I was in NASCAR where it's easy, where it seems like it's just a race to the end of the year.
See, it would drive me crazy. I'd be thinking about it constantly and being upset that my ranking wasn't where I thought it. But on the other hand, there's kind of a definitiveness to it. Like if you're at a bar talking to someone, they're like, "Oh, you're a professional tennis player. Where do you rank?" And you say, "Oh, I was as high as number 4." Like that's like really impressive.
Yeah, they're
like,
definitely.
whoa.
Well, I hope it gets that reaction in a bar, but I don't know. I'll have to try that out.
Yeah, you should try that out. Maybe wear a T-shirt.
Yeah, I got to get those made.
Yeah.
It's definitely something where, I mean, every player I think at some point says, well, it should have been higher, I should have done this, and I could have done that. And I mean, it's the same as after you finish a round of golf where you shot an 85 and you say, well, if I had just made this putt, if I had just hit this drive straight, but I mean, there's always going to be those times. So it's up to, you just got to deal with your score on the card or your ranking at that time and, hopefully do something about it moving forward.
So you don't have to name names, but I'm sure there's been scenarios where you've ranked behind guys that you could just kick their butts.
Well, you like to think so. I mean, everyone out there, if they're in the top 10, they probably have a pretty healthy dose of confidence in themselves, and I hope I'm no different. I believe in my tennis ability, so there's guys who have just happened to have a a great run at a right time, whether it be in a Grand Slam or gotten a good draw, gotten a little lucky with some withdrawals or injuries or anything like that. And so there are guys that definitely seem like they should be ranked a little higher or a little lower, but I don't know. That's part of the ranking system. It can't be exactly perfect.
So you didn't do well in Wimbledon, and that hurt your ranking.
Well, I didn't do well in Wimbledon, and there's an example of it. Didn't hurt my ranking very much because the year before, last year, I only made the third round. So this year, making the second round, I didn't lose a lot of points. So
that makes sense.
What'll be more interesting is this summer when I did really well last year. If I do really well again, I probably won't move up that much, but that's the time when you kind of have we call it having points to defend. You've got points coming off that are going to come off no matter what, so you have to try to defend them.
It sounds like you need somebody in your extended entourage who is specifically designated to figure out all this stuff, like a scoring system handler.
Yeah, exactly. It gets a little too complicated, but that's why I worry about hitting forehands and backhands, and someone else can worry about my ranking for me.
So I read this column a couple weeks ago by this idiot on ESPN magazine, and he was saying that he was worried about the future of tennis, and his big premise was that if somebody told you the greatest tennis match ever was about to be played, would you even watch it? Now, fast forward to a couple weeks later, the greatest tennis match ever arguably is played, and more than a few people watched it. You landed on the cover of Sports Illustrated. First of all, do you think that was the greatest tennis match ever?
I think it's the highest level match I've ever seen played. I definitely I believe that, and right. I think they must have reacted to that column and seen what was coming and had to prove that there's great tennis and there's people that are interested in that kind of great tennis.
Well, I'm going to defend myself. The column actually was an elaborate reverse jinx against the sport of tennis to bring it back to the prominence that it was. So my master plan worked. I timed it right before Wimbledon. I knew what I was doing, and I couldn't be happier how it turned out. I will agree with you. As somebody who once watched a ton of tennis and who played tennis, I have never, ever seen anybody make shots like that consistently.
Yeah, it was incredible how they both just raised their level and forced the other one to raise their level time and time again. And, I mean, so many times the commentators could have said, I think even more than they did, that no one else in the world is going to make that shot. Other people are going to make that shot 1 in 100 times, and it's just forcing them to play even better. And it really was incredible. And to see it in a final, it's such a big moment. It just neither one of them really blinked. I mean, Federer had a couple more unforced errors, than maybe he normally does, but otherwise the level was just absolutely unbelievable.
So when you're watching a match like that, are you just excited to see tennis played like that? Does part of you get almost like an inferiority complex? Like, oh my God, I could not hit that shot. Walk me through your emotions.
Well, I mean, since they're still my colleagues, my competitors, I'm trying to think of ways that I could be effective and still be able to beat them. I have to play those guys hopefully coming up soon, and just trying to figure out any sort of weakness, and they didn't show many there, but
no.
I'm just enjoying the tennis, but partly I'm hoping I'm going to be in that situation to make them come up with those shots against me as well, because I played Federer a few times where I've really forced him to, in my opinion, come up with some of his best tennis. I've done the same with Nadal and beaten him a few times, and in doing so, I feel like I try to just play my best tennis and figure out what's working. And watching them, it just seemed like they were both having kind of their having great days, and it happened to come up against the other guy that's the best in the world.
So they're both in the zone at the same time.
It seemed like that was happening, and that doesn't happen that often. You really don't see that high level of match in my opinion ever, but it was impressive to see.
So when you're watching, you're also kind of scouting them a little bit, and you're saying ooh, look at how he reacted to that deep backhand.
A little bit. I think you're always, while you're still playing, I think you're always looking at that. And I think same with coaches when they're watching. I think they're always looking to see what can help and what can be effective. But there are definitely times there, once it hits about 7-all in the fifth set, you're trying to just enjoy the tennis and just see, the emotion, see how their nerves are going to hold up, and just watching them enjoy the same thing every other fan is enjoying, the great tennis.
How much do the rain delays help? Do you think it helped them from a stamina standpoint, or does it hurt them from coming back out and trying to get to the same level they were at? Like, how does that factor in?
Well, I don't think either of them had stamina issues. I actually missed the first rain delay because I was out on the court practicing, but by the time I got back at the end of that, a few people that had been watching said that they thought Nadal was looking much better and he was going to possibly take it in 3 sets, and that's right when I came back, and after seeing how well Federer was playing and how well he was serving in those tiebreakers, I thought he had the better chance to win it in the 5th set until there was that rain delay in the 5th, and that that I think helped Nadal just to calm down a little, not think about the fact that he had a couple of match points in the 4th set tiebreaker, and then I believe it really helped him. You know, you never can tell; it's always hindsight to see if what would have happened if it wasn't for that rain delay. But both of them have been through so many matches at Wimbledon that they know to expect that, and I think that showed their experience by being able to come out and keep their level as high as it was as soon as they came right back out.
Now, if Federer had somehow come back in that last game, they probably would have stopped the match and continued it the next day because of darkness, right? I mean, would that have been the weirdest situation in tennis history?
That would have been really strange. I've seen finals, I believe Rafter and even he played on a Monday because the whole Sunday was washed out, but that's starting a whole match new, and that was interesting for the fans, but to come back at that point in a match at possibly 8-all in the 5th set, and that's an absolute flip of the coin, where it's just who gets the first break, basically, and that would have been a really tricky situation. It would have been, I think the fans would have absolutely loved it by coming all the way out to Wimbledon, having a packed house, but possibly only watch 2 games, and probably would have had a little bit of excitement.
Well, maybe they should put in a rule that if that ever happens again, they should just make it a tie and make a tiebreaker set, so at least you get a set of tennis.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
idea.
so tough. It's so tough with Wimbledon because you're not gonna. I don't think you're gonna budge anyone on the traditions of Wimbledon. There's that club has been around forever. It seems like it will be around forever, and they don't need to change their rules for anyone. It doesn't seem like.
All right. Well, here's my question. So I understand the whole tradition thing. I don't understand why they don't have a retractable roof because it rains all the time in England. It feels like they should have one. I also don't understand why they don't have lights because it's 2008. Now, here's the X factor. But they do have, you can review challenges. Like, you know, you can challenge certain points or whatever, and you have a certain number of challenges per set. Now, you could argue that's not tradition. They didn't have challenges in 1926. So if you can have challenges, why couldn't you have lights?
Well, I think you're already ahead of your time because the retractable roof is in progress. They're going to have it. I believe they said by next year. I never actually believe it until I see it, but they said next year the roof will be on at Wimbledon, which was pretty shocking to hear the plans for it the last couple of years, how they've been planning on doing it. And the lights, I think, would be tricky because to have an artificially lit grass court, I don't know if that would work in terms of how they water it, and if it were to get a little slippery, because grass is probably the most dangerous when it gets a little slippery. And if there's dew on it, if it's starting to get late and it gets a little slippery, that's not going to can blow out a knee or something. And so I don't think they'd want to do that, but the retractable roof is a great idea, and I'm glad someone came up with it. And in the years to come, hopefully people won't be sitting in the locker room playing cards as much as we've been known to.
I'm glad I thought of it. I think they should call it the Bill Simmons retractable roof.
I think so too. I'll mention that.
I got to ask you something, as you know, because you can watch this stuff and pick up things pretty closely. It seemed to me in the last couple games, once it started to get dark, that Federer wasn't picking up the ball as well as Nadal. And I have no proof of that other than that when I used to play tennis and we'd start to play when it started to get dark, I'm sure you did the same thing. I have terrible eyesight. And as soon as the light started to go down, it really did affect me, and I had trouble seeing it. And the guy I used to play with all the time, my buddy Bish, could see really well when it got a little darker, and it was a huge advantage for him. And I almost would want to quit as soon as it even started to get dark. And I feel like Federer almost wanted to blame the darkness when he gave his interview, and then he stopped himself and he realized that wouldn't be classy to mention that. But I could tell he was kind of ticked off about it.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, there are definitely guys that see better at night and like playing under the lights, and guys that definitely don't. I know a few guys that specifically hate playing night matches, and I think, just like you said, it's their eyesight, and I have no idea how Rogers is or if he really likes playing at night, but I think it does show how classy he is that he would never blame anything. he's won so many times, and he's, no matter how great a champion you are, you lose plenty of times throughout your career as well. And I think you get to see someone's personality and how they handle both winning and losing. And you see him being a classy guy when he wins, and you see him being a classy guy when he loses. And I'm very impressed with him almost always. And I've said it for many years, all the time he's been number one, and even before that he's really a gentleman of the sport.
See, I would be the opposite. I'd be not classy, and I would have blamed the darkness. And I would have said, you know what? I would have said we were dead even until it started to get dark, and I'm not going to apologize because I suck in the darkness. And if he wants the tainted victory, he can have it.
We need more people like you to give those interviews.
Yeah, I would have been like McEnroe. I'm not kidding. I probably broke 10 rackets as a teenager. I did not handle anything well. But the thing that impressed me about Federer really more than the tennis was the fact that he pulled off that cardigan at the end, and nobody really made fun of him the next day. The old
he pulled off the what?
He pulled off that cardigan afterward, that cardigan outfit, like that 1920s Bill Tilden type of outfit. And that didn't really take a lot of abuse, like in the sports blogs and stuff the next day, which I was impressed by. People just revere Federer. They just respect the dude.
Yeah, I mean, he's starting to get probably the Michael Jordan effect, I feel like, with the, it would hurt the reporter more to say anything negative about him than,
right.
And no one would believe it. And, it's something that, for me, it's naturally the way Roger is, because it's tough to dislike the guy. I mean, I play against him. He's beaten me a bunch of times, and I still, I want to beat the heck out of him while I'm playing, but afterwards, I'm out of the tournament, and I find myself thinking, I hope Roger wins it. He's such a good guy and has proven his talent, and so I don't think there's too many things. I mean, if people want to write about his cardigan, they can probably talk about his fashion sense, but otherwise, as a person, it's tough to find a negative, really.
Yeah, I was impressed by the way he handled the whole thing, and also like the crowd, like really, it seemed like they were more Nadal fans just because he hadn't won before in that whole thing, but the crowd really did seem split. Like it reminded me of the old, the Borg. Who was the guy that Borg played when the crowd was always split? It wasn't McEnroe because everybody hated McEnroe. I guess Borg Connors more, but it was kind of neat to hear. It was like almost like wrestling when you have two good guys in wrestling wrestle, and the crowd they're rooting for both sides and just rooting for everything that happens. And it just reminded me.
Yeah.
Hey, so
don't tennis compared to wrestling enough.
No, you don't. Well, I think you could make a case that the tennis players could come in with managers. They should have intro music. I mean, they could incorporate some WWE stuff. So
I would love that. I'm in complete agreement with you on that.
Well, I wrote this in the terrible column I wrote, but I think the Australian Open should be the experimental major. Each year, try something different to figure out like what could work and not work. Because nobody. The Australian Open, nobody can remember what happened in any Australian Open. Nobody can name. You can't describe the surface. Like it's hard. It's on TV. Like there's a 16-hour time difference or whatever it is. Like nobody ever remembers. Like, hey, remember that Australian Open in 1990? But I think they should just use that as the test thing. And maybe like one year they had the wrestling thing, another year they allow the crowd to cheer during every point. Now, I took some heat for the crowd being able to make noise during points because people said the athletes have trouble hearing the ball, which would affect the play. Is that true?
There is definitely something to be said for hearing the ball. You hear it much better indoors, and there's something to be said for that. But in terms of crowd noise, I've found there's two reasons people detract against it. And one is there really is something a little bit special about the crowd going crazy, and then you step up the line, you're getting ready to go, and it's completely silent. And
right.
It's almost like in a movie when there's a huge scene coming up, and you can tell by the music, or you can tell by it becoming deathly silent. And there's definitely something cool about that. But then also the problem I don't think would be with the noise in a center court where there would be constant noise because you got 15,000 people there. The problem is at the smaller courts where there's 50 or 100 people, they're kind of quiet, then kind of loud, then kind of quiet. If it's a kind of one sudden noise, it could be a problem. As opposed to we can all deal with constant noise, and I would have no problem with that. I actually think it would be great for the game if the crowd was allowed to just move when they want to, be noisy when they want to. It's the one out of the ordinary noise. the one cell phone going off while you're about to serve, the one person that, laughs at an inappropriate time, and that's what can be distracting. We all practice when there's things going on around us, when there's cars going by, when there's music playing, when there's anything going on. I don't think the concentration would be a problem. I just think it's something where they're avoiding a situation where there's one big distraction.
Right. Yeah, that was one of the dumb things I wrote in that column. The real problem with the column was, and I usually write like 2 or 3. I think I've read 2 or 3 dumb columns a year that turn out like I hand them in, and then like 24 hours later or 2 days later, I'm like, God darn it, why didn't I do this different or that different? With the tennis column, I really want to write about tennis and try to figure out why tennis wasn't as important to the American society as it was when I was growing up, which I think is a valid question. And unfortunately, I decided to write this column during the 2008 finals as I was writing 25,000 words about basketball. And I didn't do enough research and put enough time into it. And the bottom line is I realized afterwards, I always consider myself a tennis fan because I loved it. But I really had fallen out of the game the last few years because really the last time I watched constantly was the Sampras Agassi era. And that the way tennis is played now is just different. Like it's much more baseline now than it used to be. And especially like you saw in that Federer Nadal match, like routinely 9, 10, 11, 12 shot points. And when I fell out of it, it was mainly because of Sampras and the fact that his serve was so dominant that I just didn't really find it that interesting anymore. But now it seems like we're back to the way I used to like it.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of question or what's happening, because the game, like you said, is slowing down a little bit, even as the power is getting much, much greater.
Right.
Guys are hitting the ball harder, guys are serving harder, but with the change in the string and the rackets and the really even more so the training and the player's strength and ability, it's becoming so great that it's making serving and volleying much more difficult, and it's making the guys able to last much longer in the long baseline rallies and be able to have greater stamina. And it is very interesting because the game has slowed down even with an increase in power. And that's something that doesn't happen, and that's why the level has gone up even more, is because guys are able to do much more with these shots. And that's not taking anything away from Pete, because Pete could still probably be effective out on tour. And if he was in his prime and playing at Wimbledon, I would love to see it. It'd be interesting against these guys. But it's something where the game changes, and there may be a couple fans that don't like it, that miss seeing a match of all serve, Sampras, even Ivanisevic. But I think there's a lot of fans that hopefully, like you, are coming back into it saying, you know what, this is the kind of tennis that I did fall in love with and want to keep watching. Yeah,
I'm back. I am so back, because I can't tell you how much I enjoyed that match on Sunday. And you know what struck me was that it actually is a bad strategy to go to the net now in 2008 when somebody is in the zone like that, because every time somebody went to the net, they just got burned. So after a while, it was like, I just think it would have been a bad move by either guy to do it. Yeah. And it kind of reminded me of the tennis I grew up with, where, there would be times when McEnroe would be like trying to suck Borg into coming to the net so he could hit it by him. I just thought it was cool, and the shot making was at a level that I've just never seen. I've just never seen, especially some of the cross-court shots, because I always thought that was one of the toughest shots. When you're hitting a cross-court shot into the first box, not the ladder box. But I don't know. I think I'm back. I'm actually excited for the U.S. Open now. It's
That's
crazy.
Great. And I'll invite you. I've already invited you, but I want you to come sit in the J block. I know you've already said you didn't like your column, but I really believe you'll have fun if you sit in the J block and you get to know some of those guys that are going crazy for me, and they'll bring a little bit of the WWF into the U.S. Open. They do every year, and some of the commentators criticize them, some of them love them, and I would be on the side of loving them.
I would love to sit in the J block, and also we should mention that's kind of like your hometown Open, basically, right?
It is. I grew up an hour from there. I was born in New York, and so that's why I have so much fan support, and so many of my friends come out and fill up a whole suite and just go crazy, and they have a really good time. They just about get fired every year because they miss so much work, but they they come and support me, and I love them for it.
So, what's the furthest you've gone in the Open?
Quarterfinals.
Who'd you lose to?
I lost to Federer once, and I lost to Agassi once. In Federer in 4 sets, Agassi in 5 sets, and a 5th set tiebreaker.
Was that Agassi? Was that the last year Agassi won?
That was 2005, and he played again in 2006.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, one last question about my column before I burn all copies of it, make them remove it from my archives. The one thing that I still feel like might work is the 7-set scoring system with shorter games where you'd have more tiebreakers. Tell me why that would not work.
Well, it was actually tried in lower level tournaments, in these tournaments called futures, which are basically like equivalent of, say, single A baseball. And so they played that system 4 out of 7, but what they found was a lot of times the players would kind of, as soon as they're down a break, they'd move on to the next set, basically. So you saw way more 4-love sets, because if someone breaks you in the first game, you maybe try for the second game when you try to get the break back. If not, you kind of save your energy and get ready for the next set. And so they found it to be kind of anticlimactic, as the theory works great with the fact that you're going to have more tight moments, more close games where you're serving for a set or where you're returning to stay in a set or anything like that. And so you'll have more of those moments, but they said it didn't work as well because there were so many fewer of those, because there were so many 4-love sets.
Right.
And I don't know if I think maybe it could be tried, because at that level the players clearly aren't as mentally tough and willing to fight for every point, and that maybe those matches don't mean quite as much as if it were in a Grand Slam. So it would be interesting to see how much it would work with guys who are mentally tough, who weren't going to give up if they're down a break, who weren't going to just kind of pack it in and save their energy. They could last as long as we can, and that we're competing for as many dollars, as many ranking points, and as much prestige as we are on the ATP tour. So I actually agree with you that would be really interesting to try, but the fact that they tried it on a smaller scale and it didn't work, it might lead them to not try it.
All right, well, let's try it.
I like the way you're thinking, though. You're thinking of a lot of kind of outside the box ideas that some have been tried, some will be tried, and some might not be.
Well, I think, as always, the solution would be to try it with the Australian Open, the worst major on the planet. If we're going to try anything, everything should be tried. That's the dumping ground of all the tennis ideas. So basically, this was a terrible idea too. So basically, I thought this was one of the top 3 worst columns I ever wrote. But now that every idea I had in the column was bad, and then Federer and Nadal proved that people still care about tennis and will watch it. So now you're telling me it's the worst column I've ever written.
No. I'm saying I like that idea.
No, I'm going to say it. I think it was the worst column I've ever written, all things considered, and then how it played out after. So what was the worst tennis match you ever had at a high level?
Let's see. Worst tennis match I ever had. I'm trying to think. Hopefully it hasn't happened anytime recently. But
did you have a 6-0, 6-0, 6-0?
I've never lost 6-0, 6-0. Jeez, I can't remember.
Well, that's good. You don't remember it. Well, I'll always remember this column.
I try to always have a short memory of those kind of things.
That's good. That's smart.
I'm glad that I don't remember that, but I've definitely read many of your other page 2 columns that I appreciated a whole lot more, that I loved, especially your the notebook, your diary in the final, during the final.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to win back the tennis community, and here's why. First of all, I played tennis. Second of all, even with a bad back, I could still fall out of bed and hit a forehand down the line. I will always be able to. I'll be 80 and I'll be able to do that. And third, I actually love tennis, and I watched it. I've been watching it since probably mid-70s. So the fact that the game changed and I didn't realize it, I don't think you can totally blame me for being a little late to the party.
Absolutely not. I don't blame you at all. But I'm glad you're back.
Yeah, I'm back. I still don't enjoy the French Open. Probably never will. I don't like French people, and I never really liked clay. I always thought clay was like, even if you didn't have enough foot speed, or I don't know. I just thought it was like garbage tennis to me. I just never really could support the clay court. thing. All right, let's get to the really important question. So you went to high school with John Mayer.
I did, yeah.
And your friends.
Yeah, actually, he came to watch me at Wimbledon, and I stayed an extra day and went to his concert the next night in London.
All right, so walk me back. We're talking like what, early 90s? You're in high school?
I graduated in 97, so
90s,
yeah.
Mid-90s.
Yeah.
So you're a tennis guy. You're a guy headed someplace, possibly going to be a pro, possibly going to be really good. So you have that thing going with the ladies. John Mayer has the whole I'm a sensitive singer, I might become famous as a singer thing going. So who was doing better back then with the ladies?
To be honest, I don't think either of us were really doing that great in high school. I was about 5'3" still going into my junior year of high school, and
really,
yeah, John was still kind of fitting into a niche. I guess you'd say we both had a lot of close friends, but we weren't exactly how we are today. We weren't exactly as. I don't think anyone's entirely confident in high school. We definitely didn't have the same kind of confidence then as we do now, probably.
So back then, John Mayer,
he's more than made up for himself with his with how he's done since then.
Well, I was going to say back then he's probably like 130 pounds. He's got a huge head. He's talking about, I'm going to be a singer someday. Everybody's like, yeah, whatever. And then all of a sudden his album comes out, and now he is on one of the all-time legendary runs with the Hollywood ladies I think that we've ever seen. And meanwhile, you're thinking like, I'm a tennis player. I travel. I make money. Like, I'm doing pretty well. And this guy's like, oh, yeah, I'm kind of got involved with Jessica Simpson. Yeah, it's a long story. Like, I mean, it's got to be a little weird, right?
It is a little weird. It's pretty funny. We both, we definitely talk about our relationships and stuff, but it's even funnier when we get to see each other perform. I mean, him coming to watch me at Wimbledon, he says he gets, he just thinks back to the times we were hanging out in grade school, and we were in the same, hanging out in my basement or hanging out in his house or whatever. And then I see him. I've seen him sell out Madison Square Garden and gone to watch. Back when his family was very, very much the teenage girl kind of situation, and I went with 3 other buddies and definitely felt a little out of place, but it's still incredible to see his name in lights and him performing, and I think he gets the same feeling when he sees me, and it's just incredible to think that both of us were as passionate as we were back then about what we love, and the fact that now we're both getting paid to do what we love.
That's a great. Has anybody ever done this story? I think it's kind of fascinating that 2 guys from the same high school, relatively, normal. Where'd you go to? Fairfield High?
Yeah, Fairfield High.
Fairfield High in Connecticut. Just random. Yeah, Fairfield High. So just this random American high school. One guy goes on to be a top 5 tennis player. The other guy goes on to be one of the most famous singers of this decade. Yeah. It's just kind of strange. I'm surprised I haven't read that story in a magazine or something.
It seems like all the times when they do it, they just kind of mention it. It's like, okay, well, James and John went to high school together, but I don't think anyone ever really got into depth about how good of friends we were. Like we grew up. He was at my house literally every single day for about 3 years because his parents didn't want him walking to school, and he lived too close, so he would end up coming over to my house before his parents went to work and coming back to my house on the bus after school every day, and so we got to be pretty close, and the fact that we've gone on to do what we've gone on to do is a little crazy. And my friends, when he was first coming up, my friends didn't really believe that I went to high school, and I'm like, oh, he's doing great. I'm like, yeah, I know that guy pretty well. I went to high school, and like that's kind of crazy. And then because I've said it before, because we have there's a guy on the PGA Tour that went to high school with me too, named JJ Henry, and the guy from it's now been in a ton of movies, and it's with Drew Barrymore. Justin Long went to high school with me as well.
Whoa! So, yeah, I know Justin Long. Yeah.
Yeah.
You were on the same class?
He was a year ahead of me, so yeah, he was, but I was in math class with him 1 year, but he only went to my high school for a year, and then he transferred to our rival, the private school in our town, but.
Fairfield Prep.
He went over to Fairfield Prep, and, but the fact that like every time someone new pops up, I'm like, oh, that person went to my high school. Oh, that person went to high school. My buddy stopped believing me, so now that they've come to a few shows with me with John or whatever, they know that we get along pretty darn well.
I've always liked John Mayer. He had this weird kind of talk show once on VH1. I think they only did one 30-minute show where it was like about his life on the road, and he had he had a guest in his trailer or whatever. And it was like really kind of cool and inventive, and I always wondered whether he's been good on those VH1 shows too, but I always wondered if he would ever kind of cross over and do anything interesting, because it seems like he's a pretty clever guy, obviously because he's getting the ladies.
Yeah, he's very clever, very creative. He was really funny at those things. He's actually done some stand-up as well. Like he does a little bit of everything, and he's one of the most creative minds I've ever known. Well,
you got to watch out for him, because when you're having this kind of success rate with when you really reach the top of the mountain with the ladies, after about 5-6 years, you start getting bored, and that's when dangerous stuff. That's when Eddie Murphy ends up in the car with the transvestite. Like, you got to watch out for him with that stuff.
Oh man, I
Hugh
really
Grant.
hope my friend John. I hope he sticks with one of these ladies that he's been with now, so he doesn't end up like Eddie Murphy.
Keep an eye on him, because he starts running out of like scenarios that he's ever dreamed about. He's like, well, yeah, I did that. Oh, I did that too. Oh, I did that. Then you never know.
Yeah.
All right, so what's your prediction for the U.S. Open? Why don't you predict history right now? Predict you're going to win the 2008 U.S. Open.
Well, I'm never going to go out and do the Patrick Ewing thing, or even that guy from the Buffalo Bills, and say I'm going to win it. But I do better on the hard courts. I feel great in New York, and there won't be as much a clear-cut favorite the way Roger has been in the years past, where it seems like it's a strong conclusion. So I'm looking. I really hope by that point the way I'm playing will put me up there with one of the real contenders to win my first ever Grand Slam.
I think this could be your best chance, and here's why. You have Nadal, who just conquered the biggest mountain he could ever conquer, and he went back to Spain this week. Lord knows how much celebrating he's going to do, and then how does he get his focus back? So he's out. Then Federer, who was at this Tiger Woods level, everybody was afraid of him, nobody could touch him. Now he just took one on the chin for the first time, so maybe his confidence is a little shaken. I think the door's open. I really do. I think it just swung open for you.
I hope so.
All right. Well, you might see me in the J Block. I have to work on it. I'm finishing a book. I'm finishing a book, and it's right near where the deadline is. But I will be in the J Block either this year or next year. I promise.
Great. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to reading that book when it does come out.
Thank you. Thank you for forgiving me for my terrible tennis column.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on here.
All right. I'd love to have you on again, either before or after the Open.
Yeah, hopefully after I win the Open, your prediction comes right. You sat in the J Block for each match, and then your book comes out and it's a bestseller, and then I'll come right back on.
And then John Mayer writes an album about it, and
Exactly.
The circle will be complete. All right. Good luck. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks a lot, Bill.
Bye-bye.
So I get the sign off. Whoa.
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Pod Center at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.